So welcome everyone to our third Emerging Fellows webinar. Glad to see great attendance here. Um, I'll start by just providing a little bit of background about ASHRI and the Emerging Fellows Program, and then I'll turn it over to our speaker today. I'm Matt Isaac. I'm a professor of marketing at Seattle University, and I'm the chair of the Emerging Fellows Committee at ASHRI. So ASHRI is the Academic Advisory Council for Signage Research and Education. And really the goal of the group is to provide thought leadership that advances knowledge in on-premise signage. And part of that work focuses on bringing together and connecting academics who are doing research in various areas or disciplines that relate to on-premise signage with practitioners who are working in the industry so that the insights from academia can be used and applied in practice. And so we have had an Emerging Fellows program now for several years, since 2017. And this is a great program because it supports early career scholars in the realm of on-premise signage. And so we have fellows in many different areas, ranging from marketing to architecture, art, and urban planning. And so far, over 20 fellows have been named, and they've received over $135,000 in awards in various topics that relate to on-premise signage. So it's a great program, and I will mention at the end, but we are currently looking for emerging fellows for the next cycle, and we have a call for fellows out right now. So you can visit our website if you are interested in being part of the Emerging Fellows program in the future. This is our current class of Emerging Fellows. It's the largest we have had with 8 Emerging Fellows. 6 are in their first year, 2 are returning for a second year. And today we're going to be hearing from one of our first-year Emerging Fellows, Daniel Villanova, who is an assistant professor at the University of Arkansas. He also serves as the doctoral program director in the Department of Marketing at Arkansas. He has done really interesting research in how consumers use numerical information with applications to financial decision-making, looking at how product information is framed, and he's published widely in some of the top journals in marketing, including Journal of Consumer Research, Journal of Marketing, and others. So it's great to have him here today to talk about some of his work related to pricing and communication of price information in signage. So with that, I will turn it over to Daniel.
Thank you very much. So I'm really happy to be here to be able to present some of my research that's been supported through the Emerging Fellows program. I'm really grateful for being able to have these webinars where we're discussing and seeing each other's work and the inspiration that comes through this ASHRI Emerging Fellows program. And so today I'm going to be presenting some work on in-store pricing signage and rate finding. And so this is work that I'm doing with Rajesh Bagchi, and my mentor, Aparna Sundar, has been part of this as well. So first I want to get you to think about signage in general and work our way toward what the research topic is. And if you think about on-premise signage, these are big signs that are going to be on the exterior of the building. They're going to show what the brand is. They're going to show what the building is. Or you could have them on other even larger signs that are not on the building, anything that's going to be on the premise to kind of show you what this place is. And then as you go inside, you have what's called in-store signage. And so you can kind of see at the top of this image here, as we walk into Lowe's Foods grocery store, they have a place called the Cakery. And so you can essentially use in-store signage to facilitate wayfinding throughout the store. Where are we going? Or what is over here? And then as you get even closer, zooming in, there's a specific type of signage that I'm interested in, which is in-store pricing signage. And so this may seem trivial that you just present a price and show a consumer that there is a price. But what I study in this research is how we can play with in-store pricing signage and what that effect or what effect that will have on consumer behavior, consumer decision making in the store. And so one particular aspect of this in-store pricing signage that I'm interested in is when you present multiple unit offers. And so multiple unit offers are simply providing multiple units for a given price. And sometimes you may have to buy all those units where somebody says, oh, you need to buy 2 to get the deal. But many times the offer is just presented as multiple units, but the underlying rate is still good. And so here on the left, this is again Lowe's Foods. You have this offer of 5 candy bars for $5.50. You don't have to buy 5 to get that particular unit price or rate. And then on the right, these are newer Walmart price tags. These are for 24 ounces of potatoes. And I thought this was really interesting because these were side by side. It's the same amount of potatoes in both cases, so it's the same price, $3.24. But they presented the unit price differently. So one is in per ounce and the other is in per pound. And so with multiple unit offers, you can present these offers without a rate, in which case consumers have to engage in rate finding, or you can present them with a rate. And that's going to be the question of this research is, well, what do these rates actually do? And so there's plenty of research that suggests that consumers utilize rates. They assess gambles, they assess discounts, they assess general value. When we think about unit prices, they use rates. But the research question here is, does the type of rate matter? And so what I mean by type of rate is DPU and UPD rates. A DPU rate is a dollar per unit or unit price rate. And a UPD rate is the reciprocal, units per dollar. And we don't see units per dollar as much, but it's definitely something that managers and marketers could potentially utilize. And so what we suggest in this research is that standardization leads to focusing on the numerator. If you think about a dollar per unit rate, a classic example of this would be gasoline. Gas is $2.85. Lucky us down here, right? But that's actually per gallon, and we kind of drop that denominator. And so what we suggest in this research is that price is really going to be more salient in a DPU rate rather than a UPD rate, which is something that either marketers could provide or consumers can calculate themselves. So again, as we saw in some of the pictures, marketers can provide dollar per unit or unit per dollar rates. Well, actually, sorry, I didn't show you a picture of unit per dollar, but they could provide either. They could provide the rates. And consumers could also calculate these rates, right? They can engage in rate finding. And what we suggest here is that consumers have a preference for a larger dividend, which is a larger numerator. People like to divide a larger number by a smaller number instead of going the other way. That will then mean that in an example like this, where you have a larger price numerosity, we expect people to do a DPU rate. So if you think about £5 for $40, if people exhibit a larger dividend preference, they're probably going to show $8 per pound as the rate that they would calculate. If you have a larger quantity numerosity for the exact same offer, it's 80 ounces for $40, we expect them to create a rate of 2 ounces per dollar. And again, because the numerator is going to gain in salience, we expect in the DPU rate, whether it's calculated by consumers or provided by marketers, people will find price to be more salient. Now, in terms of what that actually means for consumer behavior, we think that this is going to affect price or promotion sensitivity. There's a lot more about this in the paper, but essentially we conceptualize price and promotion sensitivity as the same. Now, the relationship between price salience and price sensitivity has been suggested in previous literature. There's findings that suggest that promotions lead to price salience. It also leads to choosing lower priced options. Price salience also leads to price recall. And then general valuability theory would suggest that costs should be more valuable with prices than with quantities because there's some fit there. And so for all of these reasons, we actually think that price salience and price sensitivity should be related, but there's not as much direct evidence on that as you might think. So that's something that we're going to provide in this research. So that leads to our last 2 hypotheses, that we think that consumers will end up being more price or promotion sensitive with a DPU compared to UPD rate, which is something that marketers can put on their signs, or that consumers can calculate themselves depending on how the signs are framed. And then H3, the effect of the DPU versus UPD rate will be mediated by price salience. We also then look at moderation by font size. The expectation here is that if you present a rate in a small font size, it's going to be harder for people to really take account of that, and we would expect less of an effect. And this is really relevant in public policy because the National Institute for Standards and Technology put out a report on unit pricing, and they complain endlessly about how marketers have no consistency and seem to be confusing in how they present the rates that they provide. And so this is a practically relevant and public policy relevant moderator that we're suggesting here. So previous literature has mentioned this as a possible moderator. There's at least one study that looks at font size in addition to multiple other things that were manipulated at the same time. And so we'll be studying that here with H4, that this would moderate the effect. You'd expect the effect to be stronger when font size is large compared to small. And so that's our conceptual model, that the rate that consumers are focused on, either because marketers provide a specific rate or because consumers calculate that rate themselves, will impact price salience and then in turn price and promotion sensitivity, and that effect will depend on font size. So we've got 6 studies. In the interest of time, I'm just going to take you quickly through 2 of them. So we've got 6 studies here, and again, these were supported by the Emerging Fellows Program, so I'm very grateful for that. And so the first study I want to share with you is one where rates are calculated by consumers, and then the second one is when rates are provided by marketers and showing that moderating effect of font size. So in this first study, which happens to be study 2, we ran a 2-cell design between subjects where we presented participants either with a larger quantity numerosity or a larger price numerosity for the very same deals. The paradigm is that they see an offer from last week, which is our reference offer, and then they see a discounted offer today. And so we have them report how they evaluated the offers. And so this is how we can tell whether a participant calculated or not. Did they divide? Did they focus on something else? And so they don't have to divide in this study. And then they evaluate the deal. How good of a deal is this? How much value they were getting out of the offer last week, and then in a repeated fashion for the discounted offer today. And these are the stimuli we use. So we use little signs, of course, in-store pricing signage. And so in the larger quantity condition, you can see in the upper left one, we had 96 ounces of cherries for $32, right? So you could buy 96 ounces for $32 if you wanted to, or you could buy fewer, of course. And then in the larger price condition, that was just presented with pounds instead of ounces, so 6 pounds for $32. And then we have our deal, where we've changed both the price and the quantity. So it is definitely a better deal to get 4 pounds for $12. But it remains to be seen whether people are going to be more sensitive between these offers last week and today as a function of the rate that consumers come up with. And so what we see is about half of our participants just divided. We didn't ask them to divide. We didn't suggest they should. About half chose to divide. And among them, we see that for both the reference and the promotional offer, consumers were sensitive to the numerosity of the quantity or price element. So looking at the left graph, 55% of participants put price as a numerator in the larger quantity condition. So people do like doing unit prices, but they like them a lot more in the larger price condition. And so we saw that for both offers. And in terms of promotion sensitivity, we took the difference between evaluations of the promotional offer compared to evaluations of the reference offer. And we see that, yeah, of course, this is going to be a positive value, that people in the larger quantity condition see the better deal as a better deal, but they see it as a better deal to an even greater extent in the larger price condition. And so for us, that indicates that they were more promotion sensitive in their evaluations with a larger price and larger quantity, which is stemming from the DPU compared to UPD rate that they're calculating in those conditions. And so that's a situation where consumers get to calculate on their own. And so we also wanted to look at what happens when you provide these rates on the signs themselves, and then how font size moderates this. And so it's a similar paradigm. They saw an offer last week. They saw a discounted offer today. They gave their evaluations. And they also reported how salient price was in those evaluations. So how much, how important what price was and how much they weighed it in their evaluations. And so here are the promotional offers. So I can show you the font size manipulation. They all saw the same deals, but they were provided different rates. So in the UPD, unit per dollar rate, they saw that it was a quarter of a pound per dollar. In the DPU rate, they see that it's $4 a pound. And then we just played with the font size of that rate. Either it was substantially smaller or it was as large as the multiple unit offer itself. And so we were expecting a stronger effect of rate on promotion sensitivity when the font size was larger. And so actually what we found is that the total interaction was not significant. Regardless of the font size, we see this difference in the provided rate, that people are more price or promotion sensitive in the DPU rate condition. But then the question is, to what extent is that due to changes in price salience? So we observed a marginally significant interaction on price salience. As expected, we see a bigger effect in the large font size condition and a null effect in the small font size condition. And so since our question is to what extent this is actually accounting for the effect, we threw this into our moderated mediation model with a marginally significant first step, a path. We end up with a marginally significant index of moderated mediation here. So the effective rate on promotion sensitivity flowed through price salience only when the font size was large and not when the font size was small. And so we have many other studies that I haven't shared with you, but overall we end up finding that in-store pricing signage affects price sensitivity. So these are the same deals, they're just framed somewhat differently. So we frame the multiple unit offers differently by playing with larger quantity numerosity, larger price numerosity, whether we provide the actual rates and you can play with the font size. So we're making a lot of different changes to this in-store signage. And then we also show that consumers calculate, and the way they calculate is by using a larger dividend preference. They prefer the larger number in their numerator. So this actually has implications for marketers beyond just the consumer psychology of how they work with these. If you're looking for promotion sensitivity or price sensitivity, then there's actually an incentive for you as a firm to provide DPU rates. Make sure you provide those unit prices. That's going to make people a little bit more price or promotion sensitive. Or you could provide a multiple unit offer with a larger price numerosity. But that might not be your strategy. If you're interested in non-price based competition, then you should do the opposite, right? You should provide UPD rates if you're going to provide rates, or you should provide a larger quantity numerosity on your signage. And then in terms of future research, we think there's many other questions that come up from this, but I think there's at least a couple that are worth flagging here. That first of all, if price is gaining in importance, gaining in salience as a function of these factors of the rate that people are looking at, well, what attribute loses importance? Is it just that everything else kind of washes out and price gains, or do specific attributes actually play less of a role in how people end up choosing or deciding in store? And then are there effects on other variables? I think one that's top of mind for me is price image. And so if we're playing with something that oftentimes has to do with the brand or the company, you're going to encounter these kinds of things for specific offers, but as you repeatedly encounter these different framing approaches, these different rates, how does that change your perception of the store as a whole? If you're more price sensitive, are you going to start viewing the store's price image more favorably? Or are you going to be more discriminating about it? I think that's an open question that comes out of this research as well. So thank you, and happy to take any questions at this point.
Great, thank you, Daniel. So I see some questions in the chat, so maybe we'll start with that. Della, I think you noted there's also research on the amount of white space on labels. Maybe that has an effect. Daniel, you wanna talk about that, or is that something you have considered?
That's not something I've considered, but I think that's a worthy question. So like, as you saw in the font size manipulations, we actually ended up just making the font size bigger, but we didn't compensate in the blank or white space. In that case, it would have been yellow space. But so we didn't compensate on that. And so to the extent that other design factors, such as the amount of white space could moderate the effect, I think would be interesting as well. I think it would operate as probably a moderator when you're providing rates. I'm not as sure that changing the white space would change how people calculate when they calculate. But I think those are open questions, and I appreciate that. Thanks.
Um, I see Craig has a question, so we'll take that next. How about the idea of consistency across multiple signs? Does the additional information start to become a learned language that they are familiar with?
So one question we've kind of tossed around is if you see a particular version of sign, like a multiple unit offer that would lend itself to doing DPU, on the next sign that you see, in our case, a promotional offer, or it could be another sign you see elsewhere in the store, are you going to carry that over naturally? And so we made it consistent where the larger numerosity element was always larger for the reference offer and the promotional offer. But if those were to swap, we're not really sure which way it would go. So it could be a carryover effect. I think that's a really interesting question. And particularly since we refer back to general evaluability theory, I think when you're talking about a learned language or fluency with these sorts of things, it's a relevant consideration.
Great, thanks, Daniel. There's one more question or a comment. Managers, I wonder if it makes a difference whether items are sold in bulk, like produce, or whether they're typically sold by units. And actually, I had the same question. If people are used to DPU versus UPD in one case versus another, how does typicality affect them? And do they find it, maybe they think that the marketer is trying to do something, or they might have some kind of suspicion or something if you deviate from what is typical in that context.
That is another really important question, and this has been under review, and that's also been a question that's come up as well there. Most of the stuff that we've focused on is where something is sold in bulk and you can break the bulk because the rate then is particularly relevant. But that, other multiple unit offers that are typically sold in quantity units, that can be, it should extend in terms of division. We think theoretically it ought to, because what they're doing is they're approaching it with an intuitive approach. But I think it remains to be seen for sure. We've had other studies where we've utilized non-perishable items, so we've gone in that direction as well. But getting a fuller handle on the full extent to which this effect generalizes across those contexts, that's a really good question.
Great. And Della mentions a paper that I know you're familiar with, Daniel, because it's by Rajesh Bachi as well on price to visibility, and I'm assuming that's probably part or has fit into your theorizing here a bit.
Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out, Della. So like you said, it's about multi-packs where you cannot break the bulk at all. And so for these multiple unit offers, we're suggesting that you can break the bulk. And so it's a bit of a different, slightly different context. And the ultimate effect is a little bit different too. The process for the effect is a little bit different. So we get into that briefly in the paper, but I think that's also an important call out. We're not the only ones doing research here on the types of signs, particularly pricing signage. And it's a pretty dynamic space that is, I think, interesting to marketers and academics alike.
Great. Any other questions from the group here? If not, I'll just add one, especially to kind of orient this around kind of ASHRAE and signage. I mean, I think a big question, if I'm thinking about this from a sign maker kind of perspective, would have to do with kind of attention. Some of the things we've already talked about, attention. When are they likely to focus on certain aspects of the sign, especially when there are other items competing for their time, right? As you imagine walking through a busy grocery store, there are lots of signs that you encounter. And so I wonder if the next step, or if, at least for ASHRAE's perspective, maybe not for your journal submission, but from ASHRAE's perspective, would be to understand how some of your findings might be impacted in the actual kind of more dynamic kind of landscape of grocery store, or thinking about specific elements. I really liked how you looked at font size because I think that can play a big role in signage, but there might be other elements like that that are more practical, maybe less theoretical, that could be addressed and could help signage providers. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because actually one thing we kind of think about as we get toward the end of this paper is what are we going to do in this space as future research? And one of the suggestions that we end up making is focus on rates as opposed to the larger numerosity element. Because like you're suggesting, if someone is going in the store and there's a lot of stimuli, they have cognitive load, these are things that are going to reduce the likelihood of calculation, right? They're probably not going to calculate. And we have some suggestion, some evidence of this, that calculation rates go down as you make the environment more complicated. And that doesn't take away the effect among calculators, but it just means that practically speaking, you're trying to leverage an effect among a much smaller group of people. So if you're looking at a complex information environment, then we're probably, and this is going beyond beyond the studies, but I think it's worth looking into. You're probably going to be wanting to study the effect of the rates themselves. Are people still attending to the rates? I think it's a useful thing to be able to quickly glance at a unit price, or to quickly glance at something in unit per dollar. But is that what people are going to focus on when they're pressed for time? So I think it's a really important question for us to complexify the decision-making environment.
Yeah, and potentially combining it with individual differences, which I'm certain would play a big role here as well, right? Like there are certain people that pay a lot more attention to prices in general, but unit prices and things like that. So thinking about, differences in shopper style, or those individual tendencies is probably going to be pretty important as well.
Definitely.
Great. All right. Well, I think we are out of time. Thank you, Daniel, for another illuminating webinar. Just as before we end, I want to acknowledge, I saw that Aparna had joined. I know she's out of the country, so just want to acknowledge Aparna for her help as serving as an ASHRAE mentor for Daniel. All of our emerging fellows are assigned to a mentor that kind of works with them throughout the process. So just wanted to thank Aparna and thank Daniel again. If you are interested in applying to be an emerging fellow, there's information on our website. Our deadline is, I believe, in early May, so please take a look. We will have our next webinar scheduled for May 21st, where we'll hear from Dan Vlahos. So I hope you can join, and here's information about that. So thank you, everyone, for attending, and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you.